On a seemingly ordinary Tuesday afternoon, Jordan Blake slipped quietly into the spacious showroom of Blake Auto Group's flagship dealership. Dressed in unassuming jeans and a plain hoodie, a deliberate choice to blend in and avoid recognition. He wasn't here as the celebrated CEO whose name graced billboards and business magazines nationwide, but as an undercover customer, driven by a gnawing suspicion fueled by mounting complaints about discriminatory sales tactics and underhanded deals specifically targeting minority buyers at this very branch. Complaints he had refused to ignore despite the managerial attempts to downplay or bury them. As Jordan strolled past the rows of gleaming luxury vehicles, the polished chrome and sparkling paint reflecting the afternoon light, he noticed the subtle yet unmistakable shift in the atmosphere. Salesmen exchanged sideways glances, their casual conversations halting as they appraised this supposed typical customer, their smirks and hushed whispers betraying the prejudices he knew were lurking beneath the surface. The first sales representative approached, eyes flickering disdainfully over Jordan's modest attire and scuffed sneakers. And with a forced smile that barely hid his contempt, he steered Jordan quickly toward the used car lot across the street. The unspoken message clear: "You're not the kind of buyer we expect here. You don't belong in this showroom." And when Jordan politely but firmly insisted on seeing the new models, the man scoffed openly, muttering something about budget constraints and financial profiles that Jordan knew were coded language for racial profiling and assumptions about creditworthiness based on skin color. Undeterred, Jordan pressed on, knowing that the real battle would be fought not in the showroom but in the paperwork. And when the contract finally came thick, confusing, and deliberately dense, it was a masterpiece of deceit, laden with hidden fees, inflated interest rates, and bogus warranty clauses designed to drain the buyer's bank account under the guise of protection. And what made it worse was that every line bore the official Blake Auto Group letterhead, making the fraud feel personal, a betrayal from within. As if the very company he had built was complicit in exploiting the very community it was supposed to serve. His heart pounded, not out of fear or frustration, but from the gravity of the realization that this was no accident or ignorance. It was a carefully orchestrated scheme perpetrated by men who laughed behind customers' backs, mocking their accents, their questions, their very presence, confident that no one powerful enough to stop them would ever step foot in their territory in plain clothes. Jordan played along, signing the contract with a quiet fury simmering beneath the surface, taking mental notes of every name, every tactic, every smirk, every lie, while concealing the burning fire of justice that would soon ignite a reckoning far beyond this one dealership. The more he watched and listened, the clearer the pattern became: whispers about keeping the numbers up, avoiding troublesome customers, and protecting the bottom line, all coded language for systemic racism and greed that thrives when unchecked by accountability or conscience. And as the salesmen congratulated themselves on closing another good deal, Jordan felt the weight of responsibility settle heavy on his shoulders, knowing that this facade of polished luxury hid a corrupt underbelly preying on the vulnerable, and that it was up to him, the man whose name adorned the building, to tear down this house of deception from within, exposing every rotten plank and crooked nail until no trace of the lies remained, because the stakes were more than just profits, were about dignity, fairness, and restoring trust to a community betrayed by those who should have protected it. And so as he left the dealership that day, contract in hand and mind racing with plans, Jordan was not just a CEO walking away from a shady sale, he was a man preparing for battle, armed with evidence, resolve, and a vision to reclaim his company's soul and rewrite the story of what it means to truly own not just a business, but responsibility to the people it serves. Jordan returned to his sleek, modern office overlooking the city skyline. His expression carefully controlled a mask of calm, hiding the storm of anger and disappointment brewing inside as he closed the door behind him, setting down the thick folder of damning paperwork he'd collected during his undercover visit. He immediately powered on his computer and began the painstaking process of digging through months of security footage, cross-referencing it with customer complaints, sales reports, and internal communications, all in search of the pattern he already suspected, but now needed to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that minority customers, especially black buyers, were being systemically targeted with inflated prices, deceptive financing terms, and outright lies designed to push them out or trapped them in costly contracts they couldn't afford, while their white counterparts received fair treatment or even special incentives. The more Jordan uncovered, the more blatant and organized the scheme appeared. From the subtle ways salespeople would discourage certain customers by feigning disinterest or lack of inventory, to the outright falsification of documents like credit applications and warranty offers. As he sifted through the mountain of digital evidence, he discovered troubling recorded conversations and emails between employees mocking customers' accents and backgrounds, and heard whispered jokes about keeping the numbers up by any means necessary, all pointing to a deeply entrenched culture of racism and greed embedded in the very heart of the dealership. What made the betrayal sting even more was that whistleblowers' employees who had tried to expose these practices had been systematically silenced, either threatened with termination or transferred to dead-end positions. And Jordan learned the regional manager, instead of investigating, had actively covered up complaints, suppressing internal audits and sending reports that painted a false picture of compliance and customer satisfaction. It was clear to Jordan this wasn't just a few bad apples, it was a rotting barrel, a culture problem that had metastasized under years of neglect and unchecked authority, and if left unaddressed, would destroy not only his company's reputation, but the trust of countless communities, fueled by a righteous fury but tempered by strategic focus. Jordan immediately assembled a covert task force composed of his most trusted compliance officers, seasoned lawyers specializing in corporate ethics, and a handful of mystery shoppers disguised as customers to capture real-time interactions without tipping off the staff. Over the next 2 intense weeks, this team infiltrated the dealership, gathering irrefutable proof of ongoing misconduct, manipulated credit applications padded with hidden fees, finance managers coaching customers into signing exploitative loan terms, and salespeople deliberately downplaying warranties or hiding costs until after the sale was complete. And behind closed doors, the atmosphere was toxic, with employees engaging in cruel mockery of customers' languages, questioning their intelligence, and laughing over strategies to weed out buyers who didn't fit the preferred demographic. Jordan monitored every report, every recording, and every piece of evidence with growing resolve, realizing that while cleaning house was necessary, mere firings would not suffice. He needed to make a powerful example that would resonate beyond the walls of this dealership, sending a clear message to the entire industry that such behavior would no longer be tolerated under his watch. Planning meticulously, Jordan also began drafting a comprehensive overhaul of policies, including mandatory anti-discrimination training, community outreach programs, and new channels for employees and customers to report abuses safely, while considering public relations strategies to rebuild trust with the affected communities and the broader public. Throughout the process, he maintained a balance between discretion to avoid tipping off the corrupt employees and urgency to prevent further victimization, all while wrestling with the weight of responsibility, knowing that his actions could risk backlash but were essential for justice and reform. As the days passed, the deeper Jordan and his team delved into the corrupt practices, the more he felt both the pain of betrayal and the drive to turn this painful chapter into a transformative victory for his company and the people it was meant to serve, fully aware that this fight was about more than cars or contracts. It was about restoring dignity, equality, and integrity to a business built on trust and community respect. And Jordan was prepared to lead that charge with unyielding determination. The morning sun cast long shadows across the gleaming blacktop of Blake Auto Group's flagship dealership as employees trickled into the showroom, expecting a routine quarterly sales meeting, a bland, predictable affair full of pie charts and motivational speeches, unaware that today would mark a turning point, not only for their careers but for the very culture of the company they thought they knew. Jordan Blake arrived sharply, dressed in a perfectly tailored navy suit, the quiet confidence in his step contrasting with the usual casual dress of the sales floor, flanked by a team of stern-faced legal counsel, corporate auditors, and 2 camera crews, one discreetly capturing the internal proceedings and the other from a local news station invited to witness the transparency of the moment, signaling that this was no ordinary day but a reckoning long overdue. As the chatter died down, and all eyes fixed on the man who had once been invisible to them, Jordan took a slow, deliberate walk across the showroom floor, his gaze piercing the crowd of salespeople, finance managers, and administrative staff, who suddenly realized that the man standing before them was not just another executive, but the owner, the man whose name was on the building and whose power was absolute. The very same man who had uncovered the rot beneath their polished facade. He began with a measured voice, laying out the grave charges with surgical precision, the falsified contracts designed to ensnare vulnerable customers in crippling financial burdens, the systematic inflation of interest rates aimed squarely at minority buyers, and worst of all, the blatant racism that had become the poison in their work culture. From mocking accents to deliberate misinformation, all documented with video evidence, emails, and first-hand reports gathered over weeks of investigation. As he revealed names and incidents, the room shifted from confusion to horror, whispers escalating into stunned silence because there was no escaping the facts. No denying the harsh truth that this corrupt behavior had been thriving right under their noses, protected by a management team that had chosen profit over people and prejudice over principles. Jordan's voice remained calm yet resolute as he methodically called out the worst offenders, one by one, their faces draining of color as they heard their names and the damning evidence of their actions read aloud. And before they could protest, legal counsel handed them termination notices, stripping them of their positions with no room for argument. Even the regional manager, emboldened at first, found his defenses crumbling when Jordan read an email in which he had cruelly mocked a customer's accent, the callousness ringing through the room like a death knell for his career, and with that final piece of proof, the man was escorted out alongside the others. A somber reminder that privilege and position offered no immunity from accountability. Turning to the remaining staff, Jordan delivered a powerful ultimatum. They could either embrace a new era of integrity and undergo intensive retraining under the direct supervision of the company's newly established equity and ethics team, or choose to leave the company and forfeit their place in this reformed organization. And as he spoke, many looked around, weighing their choices, the gravity of the moment settling over them like a tidal wave. Because the easy path of complacency was gone, replaced by a demanding call for honesty, respect, and transformation. The majority chose to stay, recognizing that change was not only necessary but inevitable, while a handful quietly exited the building, unwilling or unable to adapt to the new standards Jordan was imposing with unwavering authority. Throughout the day, Jordan and his team held one-on-one meetings, explaining the new policies, outlining clear expectations for customer interactions, and establishing channels for confidential reporting, ensuring that the culture of silence and fear that had allowed abuse to fester would be replaced by transparency and empowerment. By the time the sun set, the dealership had been transformed not just in personnel, but in spirit. As the remaining employees began to grasp that this was more than a corporate cleanup, it was a revolution in values that promised to restore dignity to the customers they served and pride to the company they worked for. Jordan, standing alone for a moment in the now quiet showroom, felt the weight of the battle ahead, but also the first glimmers of hope. Knowing that justice had arrived not with rage, but with decisive, uncompromising leadership, and that the story of Blake Auto Group would no longer be one of deceit and discrimination, but of redemption, responsibility, and respect for every person who walked through its doors. In the months that followed the dramatic overhaul of Blake Auto Group, Jordan Blake committed himself with relentless energy to reshaping every facet of the dealership's operations, determined not just to root out the corruption, but to build something lasting, equitable, and worthy of the community's trust division that began with transparency, accountability, and a genuine desire to repair the fractured relationships his company's prior misconduct had caused. He convened a council of community advisors, composed of local leaders, civil rights advocates, and customer representatives from diverse backgrounds, who met regularly to provide direct input on policies, customer service practices, and hiring standards, ensuring that the voices of those most affected by the dealership's past abuses were front and center in its future. Jordan overhauled the hiring and training programs to emphasize not only sales skills, but also cultural competence, empathy, and ethical decision-making. Partnering with local organizations to recruit talent from underrepresented groups and creating an internal culture that celebrated diversity rather than tolerating it begrudgingly. Recognizing that rebuilding trust required more than just internal change. He launched community outreach programs that included free car maintenance clinics, financial literacy workshops, and scholarships aimed at supporting local youth interested in careers in automotive technology and business management. Initiatives designed not only to give back, but also to empower the very communities his company had once alienated. As these programs took root, the public response was immediate, and profound word spread quickly that Blake Auto Group was no longer the shadowy, untrustworthy place it had been painted as, but a beacon of fairness and integrity, a business willing to be held accountable and to stand for something bigger than profit. Customers began returning, sharing stories of respectful, honest interactions with salespeople who listened, and advisors who worked tirelessly to find solutions that fit their budgets and needs without pushing hidden fees or predatory contracts. And while the prices were fair and competitive, what truly fueled the surge in sales was the hard-earned trust Jordan had cultivated. A trust that had been absent for too long. The story of Blake Auto Group's transformation became a headline sensation, with local and national news outlets eager to spotlight a black CEO, who had not only confronted systemic racism within his own company, but had dismantled it with bold leadership and unwavering principles, inspiring countless viewers who saw in Jordan a figure of hope and justice in an industry often criticized for its lack of accountability. Interview requests poured in from business journals, community forums, and podcasts, giving Jordan a platform he had never sought but embraced because of the message it allowed him to amplify. That true ownership meant using power responsibly to create change, that a company's value was measured not just in dollars, but in the dignity it afforded its customers and employees alike. Throughout this process, Jordan remained deeply humble, always crediting the team of courageous employees who stood with him, the community members who challenged him to do better, and even the former customers who shared their painful experiences. For without their voices, this revolution in business ethics would have been impossible. But beneath his humility burned a fierce determination to ensure this story would not end with his company alone, that it would ripple across industries, inspiring others to scrutinize their own practices and confront uncomfortable truths, because the fight against discrimination and exploitation was not confined to one dealership or one city, but was a battle that needed leaders willing to stand firm and lead by example. In quiet moments, Jordan reflected on the journey from the day he discovered the fraudulent contracts and racist policies, to the tense confrontations with his management team, to the emotional meetings with employees and customers as he unveiled the new vision and, though the path had been exhausting and fraught with setbacks, the transformation was undeniable, a testament to what could be achieved when courage met conviction. As the dealership's reputation soared and its profits grew sustainably, Jordan knew that the real victory was intangible, but immeasurable, reclaiming the trust of a community that had felt invisible and undervalued for too long, proving that business could be a force for good, that change was possible even in the face of entrenched injustice. And perhaps most importantly, he hoped that the next time a customer walked through the doors of Blake Auto Group, no matter their background, they would be greeted with respect and honesty, safe in the knowledge that here was a place where they mattered, where their story was heard, and where a black man who owned the business had used his power not to exclude, but to include, uplift, and transform not just a company, but an entire narrative about what leadership and ownership truly mean in America today.